When we talk about the most jaw-dropping, franchise-defining moments in NCIS history, almost everyone immediately points to Ziva David leaving the team. And don't get me wrong, that was a massive, seismic shift for the show. But if we're being completely honest, I think there is an earlier moment, a much older foundational moment, that permanently rewired the DNA of this series. And it happened all the way back in season 2. Caitlin Todd was only on this show for 2 seasons. That's it. In the grand scheme of a show that has run for over 2 decades, that is a drop in the bucket. But her death didn't just remove a character from the board. It completely shattered and rebuilt how Gibbs, Tony, McGee, and Abby related to each other, to the job, and to the very real danger they faced every single week for years afterward. Today, let's go through exactly what happened to Kate on that rooftop. We're going to break down why her death worked as one of the most brutal and effective fake-outs in television history, how each member of the team distinctly processed losing her, and why the real-life reason Sasha Alexander walked away from a hit show is honestly a lot more relatable than most fans probably realize. Let's start with the actual death itself, because I still think about how masterfully this sequence was constructed. The build-up wasn't just a single episode. The team had spent multiple episodes hunting down a terrorist and double agent named Ari Haswari. Ari was a terrifying antagonist because he kept escaping punishment, heavily insulated and protected by his own government. But more importantly, Ari had a genuinely unsettling psychological fixation on Kate specifically. He didn't just want to evade the team, he always sought her out. He always tried to get her alone to play these twisted mind games. There's a crucial detail that makes this whole arc land even harder in hindsight. The first time Kate ever had a clear shot, the first time she had the chance to end him, she hesitated. She let him live, later claiming there was just something about his eyes that made her freeze. But after he subsequently took her hostage, and she saw exactly the kind of monster he really was, she made a promise to herself. She would never, ever hesitate again. That brings us to the sniper sequence. When the team finally closes in on Ari, the tension is at a boiling point. Kate throws herself in the line of fire, taking a bullet squarely to the chest to protect Gibbs. For one horrifying, breathless second, the show makes you believe that is the moment she dies. She goes down hard. But then, Gibbs helps her back up. She's fine. She took it in the Kevlar vest, and right as the audience exhales, right as you let your guard down and think the danger has passed, Ari shoots her again. This time, right between the eyes. She is gone instantly. There are no final words, no dramatic goodbye speech. Gibbs and Tony just stand there, their faces painted with her blood, frozen in absolute shock. That fake out is genuinely one of the most brutal, unforgiving moments this franchise has ever produced. The writers deliberately let you believe she survived, let you feel the relief, just to rip it away completely a second later. But here's what I think actually makes this moment so essential to the show's entire history. It's what happened to the team in the aftermath. In the season 3 premiere, right after her death, the show does something brilliant. Each character is forced to process losing her, and they do it through a series of hallucinations and visions that are completely, heartbreakingly specific to who they are. Gibbs, carrying the crushing weight of leadership, sees her angry and upset with him. She represents his ultimate failure as a boss. Working through that vision is genuinely what he needs to do to find a sliver of peace by the time they bury her. Tony, in classic Tony fashion, deflects his trauma with inappropriate humor. He imagines her in an exaggerated, over-sexualized way, dressed in a Catholic schoolgirl outfit. That coping mechanism actually rubs off on McGee too. McGee initially imagines her as a badass superhero, doing incredible flips and Matrix-style stunts, reflecting his rookie idolization of her, only for his version to slowly morph into something closer to Tony's fantasy as he tries to make sense of the loss. Abby, on the other hand, sees Kate in a full goth outfit. In Abby's mind, Kate is lively, animated, and having fun, which perfectly encapsulates exactly what their real-life friendship felt like behind closed doors. And then there is Ducky. Ducky, who spends his life talking to every single lifeless body on his autopsy table the exact same way. Ducky simply notes, with a quiet, devastating sadness, that Kate is the only one who ever actually talks back to him. Watching how differently every single person on that team pictures her tells you absolutely everything about how uniquely they each loved her. And the writers never really let her go. Long after her death, the phantom of Kate Todd hung over that bullpen. The team keeps slipping up in these painfully human ways. There's a brilliant, quiet moment later on where McGee is frantically searching for something in the evidence van, and Tony almost tells him to just ask Kate, since finding things was always her specialty. He gets halfway through the thought before he catches himself, the realization washing over his face as he has to forcefully shut the door on the memory. The show even went so far as to turn her name into a literal survival code. When Tony is held hostage and needs to secretly tell Gibbs over the phone that someone has died without alerting his captor, he casually drops the line, "I've got Agent Caitlin Todd looking for her." And Gibbs, being Gibbs, doesn't miss a beat. He instantly understands exactly what that means. Her memory literally became the thing that kept them safe. I also think it's worth taking a step back to talk about who Kate actually was to these people while she was alive, because that's what makes the void she left so massive. She and Abby had a rare, genuine friendship completely outside of work. They knew the intimate details of each other's personal lives. Kate even hand-drew a picture of Abby as a bat, a drawing that Abby proudly framed and hung in her own lab. Abby took her death harder than almost anyone, and that grief turned into a fierce, protective skepticism. It made her genuinely distrustful of any new person who tried to join the team afterward. Then you have Gibbs. Gibbs and Kate shared a profound mentor-mentee relationship. He stripped away her Secret Service rigidity and taught her everything she needed to know to survive in his world. And they trusted each other implicitly in the field. And of course, her relationship with Tony. It was pure, chaotic sibling energy. It was constant bickering, relentless roasting, and she found his frat boy humor disgusting more often than not. But underneath all of that abrasive banter, when the stakes were high and things actually got serious, they consistently proved exactly how much they cared about each other. So, with all of this incredible character work, why did Sasha Alexander actually leave the show in the first place? Fans have speculated for years, but the truth is, it wasn't a creative falling out. There was no dramatic, toxic behind-the-scenes conflict. She had originally signed a standard contract for 6 seasons, but the sheer reality of the workload became the central issue. Network television in the mid-2000s was a grueling machine. We are talking about roughly 24 episodes a season, which translated to about 10.5 months of continuous filming, often stretching into 16 or 17-hour days. That is a genuinely punishing, exhausting schedule that leaves almost zero room for a life outside the soundstage. Alexandra ultimately decided she couldn't maintain that pace. She wanted to focus more on her family and be far more selective about the work she chose to take on going forward. When you actually look at the physical toll of that schedule, I think that's a much more human, understandable reason than the internet often assumes. And it's honestly incredibly hard to blame her for making that call. And here's the final piece of this puzzle, the part of the story that I think ties this entire legacy together. Kate's death didn't just create a hole in the team. It created the necessary space for one of the most beloved characters this franchise has ever produced. When Ziva David arrived, she became a perfect match for Tony, but in almost the exact opposite way Kate had been. The writers were smart enough to know they couldn't just give us Kate 2.0, where Kate and Tony bickered like siblings who couldn't stand each other's humor. Ziva was a highly trained Mossad operative who matched Tony's chaotic energy directly. She was just as intense, just as raunchy, and just as unfiltered as he was. That specific dynamic eventually built into one of the most iconic slow burn will they won't they relationships in modern television history. Ziva proved herself to be an invaluable legendary member of that team in her own right, bringing something genuinely fresh and dangerous into the bullpen. But the truth is, Kate was never actually replaced. She was mourned, she was referenced, she was coded into secret messages, and quietly, deeply missed for years, even as the show successfully moved forward and built something entirely new. I think that's ultimately why this moment mattered more than almost any other cast departure this franchise has ever experienced, even Ziva's. Kate wasn't just a character who got transferred to another agency or rode off into the sunset. She was the first real devastating loss this show ever asked its audience and its characters to actually sit with. NCIS Season 24 premieres this fall on CBS, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Drop a comment down below and tell me, do you think Kate's death was the true turning point for this franchise? And out of all the visions the team had of her in that Season 3 premiere, whose version of Kate do you think said the most about how they actually saw her? Because I honestly think Ducky's simple, heartbreaking answer that she's the only one who ever talks back might just be the most quietly devastating one of all.